Rachel, I'm so incredibly happy that you're doing it, because recently it was you asking me questions, and now I get to know you a little bit better. So I'm super psyched about it. We read the similar books.
Yes.
Something that we both love to travel, and we travel quite a bit. And the general topic of the conversation today is your journey towards self-discovery, your journey towards embracing authenticity. But how it all started?
That's a good question. It's funny because I've always been pretty opinionated, and I've always had a pretty good idea of what I think is right and wrong, and what I think is authentic. I've always had like a really good kind of gut feeling guiding me towards different people and situations, and so in that way, I've been really lucky. I think it really started with both of my parents are very like open people, open communicators who I think they connect with really authentic people. So growing up, I was always in spaces of like authenticity. You know, they don't pretend to be something that they're not. They're very honest, humble, and funny people. So I think I automatically was raised in an environment where authenticity was all around me. But I do find, because I live between Europe and the United States, and I think in the United States the culture can sometimes tend towards pretending to be something that you're not. I don't know if that's an influence from Hollywood or consumption, like we've talked about previously. It's kind of more of a consumer-based culture over there. And so when I found my way to Europe, when I was 20, I did a study abroad in Seville in the south of Spain. And then was able, because I was there for the full year, so I had, I think it was something like 4 weeks. It was like a full month off between semesters where I traveled around Europe and got to see places like Dublin, where I have family, and then flew all the way to Prague and got to see Budapest. And it just kind of opened my eyes to kind of that there is a less consumerist culture out there. And so I think that that's also part of my kind of self-discovery as well, has been spending time, as we talked about traveling, specifically in Europe. I know a lot of Europeans would probably say that we're consumerist over here too, and it's true, but you probably know the differences as well. I think in the States it can be a bit more intense. So yeah, that's kind of a general overview of my life so far with this self-discovery. And
So how did it happen that you decided to come back to Europe?
That's a good question. I fell in love with Spain. I've been studying Spanish for years, and I really loved like flamenco and Spanish food. And yeah, just the culture was really beautiful. And I decided that I really wanted to go back. Obviously, I love my family. I have so many amazing friends back in Seattle on the West Coast. And I was in a Spanish class, and my professor mentioned to the class that there was this program in Spain that the Spanish government runs for native English speakers to come to Spain and teach English for 9 months. So that was my ticket back back to Spain after I graduated from university.
And do you see yourself staying in Europe or traveling back and forth? Where do you feel more yourself?
That's a good question. It's tough. I would say that I'm more aligned with like European values. Like I definitely prefer like a more socialist government. Politically, I'm much more believe in individual freedoms, which is funny because it's ironic because that's always been kind of like an American thing. but like not really anymore. So in that way, I feel very able to be myself. You know, here you can go topless on the beaches. You know, you can have a beer on the beach. Nobody's going to arrest you. Nobody, you know, and over in the States, you know, that sort of personal autonomy isn't necessarily as it's not given to people, right? So I think in that way, I feel a lot freer and more myself in Europe and a lot more relaxed. I also appreciate like a more relaxed lifestyle where, you know, you're not commuting for an hour and a half to work. You don't have to own a car necessarily. Right now I'm living in a city that's very well connected, and I get to live near my friends as well. I know that a lot of my friends back home in Seattle have to drive for like 40 minutes to get to each other's houses. And yeah, but then of course, when I go home and I'm surrounded by my friends and my family, I feel 100% myself as well. So it's an interesting, like socially, very much in the United States and here because of my friends here, but then kind of culturally, I think maybe Europe is more comfortable for me.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna double down on the personal development aspect because last time we spoke, we've mentioned the 4 rules books and your interest in spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm alluring it in this topic of personal development, but in reality, we're talking about spirituality here. So, how it did happen? When was your first aha moment?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. And my first aha moment, I'm not sure, I can't really remember there being a first aha moment. I remember I went, my mom put me in a Catholic preschool. So when I was like 3 or 4 years old, because she didn't want me, they're not religious, but they wanted me to not be like illiterate, you know, when it comes to religion. And I was really confused about like, is there a difference between God and Santa Claus? Like, so classic religion, like, I guess more Western religion has never really seemed very appealing to me. And a lot of people like relate religion and spirituality to be the same thing. And I don't think that is true for me at all, because I wouldn't consider myself religious. So I'm not sure exactly when it started, but I do remember I've always been very like a reflective person, thinking about like what's right and wrong, thinking about what's good for people. And when I was in my 4th year of high school, my senior year, I like was 17, 18. I took a honors humanities course that was really interesting. It was like a historical context, and then we also read books that went within the context. So we read the Bible, we read the Torah, we read the Bhagavad Gita, we read like some of like Plato's work that spanned like religious, spiritual, and philosophical kind of boundaries. It kind of blurred all the boundaries, and I think that was one of the moments when I really dug in deep when I was 17 or 18, and just thought it was really interesting and really important as well. Because you know, when you're 17 or 18, you're making like all of these huge decisions about your life, and in the States, I think those decisions seem even more intense. You know, they're always talking about like, what's your 5-year plan? And where do you see yourself in 10 years? And that always felt very like oppressive to me. I was like, I think that part of the beauty of life is like letting things happen as they happen and experiencing things, even if they're not planned. And yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
First, I love the idea of a 17 years old being presented with Bhagavad Gita and Torah. Like that just sounds beautiful. Like it's when I'm thinking about the Polish upbringing, there's Bible and the religious lessons, and there's just only Christianity, and it just sounds marvelous to be able to open your horizon so early. So that's like I officially jealous, but
I got super lucky. In a lot of the United States, it's very much the same way as like the Polish upbringing.
Yeah.
So I got really lucky. My teachers were awesome.
Where I was trying to take it with this question is that very often through the conversations with my friends or people on Authentic Hour, they're mentioning that there was always this, that we grow through pain. And there is a difficult moment that they needed to, they were faced with. So they actually started reaching deeper and discover spirituality. But from what you, and this is where I was trying to take this question to, but from what you were saying, yeah, you were just very lucky with opening your horizons so early on.
I think in some ways I was like, that was like I definitely intentionally chose that class. It's not like a class that they offer to anyone. You have to sign up for it. It's like an honors course, and it's like a block class. So you're taking like the history part and the English part. So it's a big time commitment, and not a lot of people choose it. So I was very intentional about choosing it, but I do think that my discomfort kind of in American society, like that would be what would come to mind, would be what was the uncomfortable thing. I just felt like, I felt like there was like more to life than, go to work, come home, go to bed, you do the whole, and like have children by the time you're, 35, or, it just felt like that wasn't going to be enough for me. And it definitely wouldn't have been if I had gone that very traditional route. So I think that is probably part of what pushed me to go a bit deeper and out of like the more shallow subjects, I think. So it wasn't like it was one big moment that that pushed me to become spiritual. It was kind of just this like feeling of like, I know that there's more. I can feel that there's like connection and that sort of thing with like certain people, and like it's interesting because it's very like it's like spirituality is like political to me. I like to say that like everything is political, and I think that sort of dissatisfaction with the culture that I was in drove me to be interested in those sorts of books and subjects.
But you mentioned something very interesting, which is spirituality can be political. And I do agree with that. But before I say that I'm going to agree with that, would you like to elaborate on it? Like,
yes, yeah, I think everything's political when it comes down to it. I think the political status, what kind of political system that we're living in is what gives us freedoms or takes freedoms away from us. Politicians burn books, in some political beliefs, and by doing that, they burn history, knowledge, self-reflection, different perspectives. And I think that's where spirituality comes from. So I think depending on your kind of political climate, where you come from, your spirituality and your ability to like connect with other people and yourself is going to be like heavily influenced. So yeah, I'm not, does that answer your question? Or
definitely, because the question was like, what do you mean by that? So that's definitely answered the questions. And is the way I think about spirituality and how it can become political. So when you are talking about politics, I'm thinking about the concept of the society we live in that maybe goes beyond the politics, but is more about consumption and materialistic outlook on life. That it just such a significant way it defines the society and the culture that we live in. That very often it defines the values that we should be carrying as a society, which is
Right.
very often perfectionism, productivity, power, and
Right.
spirituality in its origin stands, in my perspective, in opposition to that, because it's about, if in material outlook we define the worth of a human being by the external factors and how the person is able to manage the external factors, then in spirituality we emphasize that we are worthy and we are loved by definition of being human.
Right.
And it's almost like we've been living for so long in a system that cherish external factors and the external definition of the value of one being, that we can see this opposition in spirituality nowadays becoming, I don't want to say popular, but more attractive to more and more people. And I feel that it happens exactly from the reason which you defined, that you always felt that there is more.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I think that's a direct product of like being in a capitalist society that's like driven by politics. Like our biggest politicians in the United States are funded heavily by the biggest corporations in the United States, right? And so that's part of why I found Europe to be much more attractive, is because to me it seemed, at least like Spain, and I'm sure Spanish people will say it's not, but it seems less corrupt than it is the United States, and then I'm not really sure how to answer that. I think spirituality, like, you can have spirituality without having politics, but I think you can't have politics without having some influence on spirituality. Maybe is because spirituality is very. I guess it depends on how you define spirituality, and in some belief systems, it's very individualistic. It's like the practice of like unattachment is very important. To how you experience spirituality in the world, and then in others it's like this idea of like unity, and how you affect other people affects your spirituality, and then of course it goes into religion as well. Like a lot of what I'm talking about is kind of referencing different religions, especially like Eastern religion. But I do think that in the wrong political environment, your ability to practice spirituality and self-discovery is extremely limited. And in the right political environment, I think it's helped along quite a bit. I'm not sure if that completely answered your question or if I'm going in the right way, but
look, we are going in the way, whatever it's going to lead us. So it's all perfect, because at the end of the day, it's really about speaking our minds and just this is authenticity. This is exactly, just us expressing our perspective. So there is no wrong or bad answers. It's just sharing our perspective, which is beautiful. Because what you've mentioned, we've observed through hundreds of years how the political systems can impact the freedom to explore spirituality. So that's definitely the case. So now going back to authenticity, and it's a question which I'm asking every single person. It's almost like I'm creating this dictionary of how do you define authenticity?
That's a good question. My response, I feel like, is going to be biased because we had this conversation on the last call, but I'll try to make it as unbiased as possible. Authenticity is being who you are, unapologetically. And like we talked about previously, that has to do with knowing yourself and knowing who you are and what you want and what you connect with, and what makes you feel good and what makes you feel bad, in very simple terms. And I think then being able to take that self-knowledge and act on it. So not necessarily that there has to be somebody watching, but being true to yourself, I think, is a very big part of authenticity. Being honest as well, and not trying to be something that you're not as well. Yeah, I think that sums it up.
Indeed. And how does it feel
to be authentic? How does it feel? How does it feel in your body? I feel like when you're being really authentic, it feels like you're like walking on air, a little bit. I think you feel light, and it's you feel light and you feel right as well. You feel like you're not that you're arguing with somebody, but you feel good. How does it feel? Yeah, just it feels, and somebody like I'm a writer. I write in my role right now. I work for a tech company, so it's not always the most creative writing, but I've always found that when I'm more in touch with myself and I'm being kind of more authentic to what I'm actually interested in and what I want to talk about, you enter people call it like the flow state, where you can create more easily. And I think that when you're being authentic, even if you're not creative, it's easier to put energy into what you're doing. It's easier to create if you're creative, or do things if you're not creative, make friends. It's easier to know kind of the world around you because you're being authentic. Other things can react authentically to how you're acting, and it's easier for you to understand things and to know where you're wanted or where you're not wanted. So yeah, I would just say life is easier when you're being authentic.
And if someone would ask you, how would you learn to be authentic?
That's a great question. That is a really good question. I think like this might not be the most spiritual answer, but I think one of the best ways to be authentic is to be surrounded by people who are also authentic, and or seek people out who are authentic and surround yourself by people who are, because people who are authentically themselves are much like you. It's easier to be authentic when you're surrounded by authentic people. I think we've all had that one friend who's a bit abrasive. Sometimes you fight with them, but like they're always authentically themselves, and like it's so liberating, to be surrounded by them. So I think, yeah, the number one thing, the easiest way probably and the fastest way is to seek out authenticity, and surround yourself by it. And then also I would say like, I think it's funny because it's like, it's ironic because they're two completely opposite things, but spend time with people and things that are authentic and that are like very outwardly authentic. And then also spend time by yourself. I think that's something that I'm learning, especially as I'm getting older. I'm no longer a teenager, no longer in my early 20s. And like, in those days, I spent a lot of time surrounded by all sorts of people. And now I'm realizing that to really be in touch with yourself, you do need like time alone, doing things that you love to do. And yeah, I think practicing joy, and spending time doing what you love will, by yourself, in a very like obviously not performative way, is going to help you feel more in your body and more expressive. There's a really great book called, oh shoot, what is it called? The Art of, just one second, I'll try to find it. Oh man, I'll try to think about it. Let's see. Yeah, I can't quite find it. Oops. I'll keep thinking about it, and if it comes to me. But basically, it's about getting back in touch with yourself. Oh, I remember, The Artist's Way, I think.
Oh,
Is the name of the book. Yeah, it's fabulous. Let me just find the author really quick. The author. Yeah, Julia Cameron. It's about how like teaching people in the creative space how to get back in touch with themselves and to kind of quiet that inner critic and doing small things that you love, I think, for no other reason that you enjoy them is a really good way to get back in touch with who you are authentically.
You've mentioned 3 huge buckets, which I would love to dive deeper into them. One was solitude, because I fully agree. In order to connect with ourselves, it's worth spending some time alone. And making a clear differentiation between loneliness and solitude. Because that's one thing. But then, in my mind, it all comes together in a natural cycle. Like, you learn how to be with yourself, so you embrace your solitude, and then the next step, as you're embracing your solitude, you recognize your inner critic, so you're able to not only recognize it, but you're also able to calm it down. I don't know, just shut it down, but just really calm it down and realize that your inner critic is nothing else that your fear. And instead of fighting your inner critic, the best thing you can do is just embrace it. And then as you embrace your inner critic, you go to a path when you realize that you're learning how to listen to your own body. Because I have this theory or feeling that this inner critic is so loud that it numbs all the other sensations from our bodies. And it further drives the disconnection between the mind and the heart and the body, and we just living as robots on autopilot. So as the inner critic is being calmed down, then what's happening, we are getting to the point when we can work on the connection with our own bodies. And it's like a pathway towards authenticity. But that's my hypothesis and my flow, but I would love to hear your thoughts on, because you've mentioned all of those 3 aspects. Are they related or they are not related? How do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think like you mentioned, like your physical presence in the world, your body, and that is like a very critical aspect. And it's interesting. It makes me like go back to what we were talking about earlier, or like what I was talking about, like about American culture. You know, we have like a huge consumer rates. We have very large suicidal population, and we have really, really unhealthy, like physically unhealthy people as well. And I think a lot of it does go back to, you have this part of yourself that critiques yourself, and you're never taught to deal with that. So what do? You distract yourself with like TV or social media or video games. And what do? You're sedentary when you're in that state as well. And then your body takes its toll, or it takes a toll on your body as well. And I really, I think that like a human right is solitude. I think everyone is deserving of having their own space and their own time for themselves. And we're losing more and more of that in this interconnected culture of you have to be always on. if you don't reply to me within 24 hours, you're a bad friend. You know, if you don't reply to your boss, to a Teams message, you know, on a 6 o'clock on a Friday night, you're a bad employee, you know. And I think that starts to really weigh down on your psyche, and it pushes you further away from yourself for sure. So yeah, I definitely agree with your flow. Yeah, it's interesting. Like even, I don't know, like I'm thinking of like kind of crazy stuff like brainwashing and like cults and stuff. And like one of the ways that cults get people kind of wrapped into them, and how they kind of lure people into their clutches is, you know, sleep deprivation, like drugs, alcohol, you know, kind of crazy practices that make people disrespect their boundaries and their bodies, you know, and I think that is where a lot of suffering comes from, and it comes at all different stages, spiritually and physically. And I have to agree that I think it all does come from, it starts in solitude, spirituality.
You mentioned a very interesting topic when it comes to brainwash and cults, and I went through an experience of being close to the entity, which you can call a cult, and what you've had on, because what happens is that you are being in such an environment, which you mentioned, like sleep deprivation, some kind of weird practices. It almost, and they're very clear hierarchy, and your worth is defined very clearly, or where you are in the particular hierarchy.
Right.
And it strengthens the feeling of not being good enough.
Right.
Exactly.
Your critic.
Exactly. And after observing the cult environment for a while, I kind of came up with this, I become very grateful, because I realized that this is exactly what happens in the modern society, but because it happens on a much wider scale, we don't see it. When there's a group of 40 or 50 people who are experiencing it, it's much easier to see those interpersonal relationships. Just there is a guru who drives all of that, and you know, the entire community just tries to fight for his or her attention.
Right.
And it just feels like this is what we are doing in the societies very often, but just on a wider scale. So we don't experience it that much, that we don't experience it on a personal level.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there is some sort of aspect of like, humans are inherently social creatures. We need groups to survive. We need a social life to survive. But it's really interesting when people use that and that necessity and twist it into being like a popularity contest or something even more sinister, right? I think it happens a lot. You know, it's like the classic case of bullying as well, which is getting even worse now that you're online, or that young people are online. You know, Instagram and social media are such popularity contests, and they give, I think the most sinister thing about them is they, like probably with cults as well, is that they give, I think so many people are so starved for authenticity and for connection that they're looking for it here, and it gives you it seems like you have a social life. It seems like you're connecting with people online, but really it's lacking everything that you want in a social interaction. And same with cults as well, because what people want is, we want like to be loved unconditionally, right? But then your experience in a cult is by definition conditional.
Yeah.
And it's the same, I think, on social media and a lot of other things that we do as a society as well. it very quickly turns toxic.
That's so on point. So on point. There's a beautiful conversation between Brenda Brown and Vivek Murthy, which was recorded, I believe, in 2020, so before the pandemic, but during the social media boom. And what they are highlighting is that exactly what you just described, it through social media, we have this impression that we are building a relationship with someone through commenting and liking, but in reality is not a social interaction, because in order to have a social interaction, we need more senses to be engaged. And we, almost like a society, we accepted the fact that commenting on someone's post is a relationship, as they're saying in modern dating. Oh my God, he commented on my picture, like this is, he's definitely interested. I was like, what? And exactly. The relationships become so superficial, and at the same time, exactly as you voice it out, so we crave authenticity. And for whatever reason, we can feel it. We are drawn towards it.
Yeah.
But, and I'll tell you what's your perspective, but I feel like we are drawn to the level of authenticity, which is defined by how honest we can be with ourselves.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I think that's a classic reason for like social grouping. Like, I think that's why like a lot of our friend groups act and look like a lot like we do, is because you're looking for matches, right? In a lot of different ways. I think that especially has to do with authenticity, because there's like this great quote, like we're looking for like comfort, I think, in the modern day, and like relationships are inherently uncomfortable. Like friendship is inherently uncomfortable. Like a good friend, like who knows, if they're really acting authentically with you, if they have a bad day, you're gonna fight. There's gonna be things that happen, and negativity is like an inherent part of life. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing to have conflict with friendships. In fact, I think it makes them deeper. But yeah, we're seeking out, if you're uncomfortable with yourself and you're like, oh, I would never want anyone to think that I'm having a bad day, right? You're going to look for that in other people as well. You're going to look for people who are always, seeming happy, but nobody's ever really always happy, are they? So you're finding somebody who's dishonest with themselves, and then by turn, they're dishonest with you. And then that kind of draws down like honest connection and authenticity. And it's bizarre, I think. And it's hard, because then you're stuck, you kind of find yourself stuck in the same social circle, and there's not growth, there's not personal growth. And so I think, like what we were talking about earlier, discomfort, I think there's like, I had a really big friend breakup when I was like 13, I think. And I was just surrounded by these young women who were not necessarily bullies or anything, but they just weren't really comfortable in themselves. And, you have to push through that uncomfortable moment to then open yourself up to people who are willing to be true and honest and comfortable in themselves. So yeah, I think we're definitely limited by our own.
There's something which I feel like I would like to highlight with our conversation, and it's something which I had a conversation about it recently with my yoga teacher. That very often people who enter spiritual path, they feel like, oh, it's going to be rainbows and unicorns, and a little bit like we describe with authenticity, it feels like you're walking on air. It's a bliss.
Mm-hmm.
But what's
Mm-hmm.
worth highlighting is that it's not going to be always like this.
No.
That
There are
it's,
going to be people who, right.
and it is like you continue walking this journey, which is not easy,
No.
because it's a journey of constantly calling on your own bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a journey of constantly monitoring almost your own self and
Mm-hmm.
observing how you are reacting, how you are feeling in your body, how a particular situation makes you feel about yourself. Not how
Mm-hmm.
you feel about others, but how a particular situation or group of people or whatever is happening, it actually makes you feel about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are those moments of bliss, but
Yeah.
then after that, there's going to be.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. I think, yeah, you like, obviously not everybody's on the same, like spiritually or socially on the same wavelength as you. And so you're gonna have conflict with other people. And oftentimes that conflict, like feelings like jealousy, or frustration, a lot of times that is actually coming from your own internal state, how you feel about yourself, and how somebody else is acting is triggering you because you have something unresolved, right, internally. So yeah, it's not like you're going to reach enlightenment and you're going to be like, the world's going to be bliss, it's going to be great. It's a constant fight, I think, and not necessarily like a violent fight or anything, but it is, and maybe fight is the wrong word. It's constant work, I think, and you're gonna have 6 months where you're like totally disconnected from yourself, and like, I mean, maybe not everyone, but I know it happens to me sometimes where I'll be like, wait, why am I doing this? Or like, what, I've been doing this thing for a while now, and like, what is the point? And or feeling a certain way about somebody and having to go inwards and figure that out. And yeah, it's constant work. But I think that feeling of bliss, it will always come back. As if you're able to come back to it, come back to yourself. That feeling of bliss is gonna come back. I think that's the nice thing about it.
Which leads us to the fact that it's all about consistency.
Yeah.
Just keep showing up. And the funny part about it is I keep thinking about it in layers. You start your practices and you can, the truth is that you can apply to any aspect of your life. From if you're an entrepreneur, or if you are at work or relationship, any aspect of your life, you can apply the same logic to it, which is keep showing up, keep doing your daily practices, keep verifying whenever what you're doing resonates with the new version of yourself.
Right.
And the element which I think is important in spirituality or the personal development is that in all the other aspects, there's going to be a material manifestation of your efforts. So if you're in entrepreneurship, you can define what's your monthly recurring revenue, and that's my goal.
Right.
In your education, you can also set a particular bar and just aiming to achieve it.
Yeah.
While in spirituality, yes, you can aim for enlightenment, but it's almost like just another metric which we apply to our own minds just
Right.
to reach the goal. And I believe that the ultimate objective of this path, and many people gonna follow the aspect of what's my purpose. But the purpose, again, is going to be defined by the material metrics. My purpose is to become a podcaster, or my purpose is to become, and in reality, it's all about just learning how to enjoy this experience of being alive.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. I feel the same. We're such, and I think that goes hand in hand with like consumerism. We're such like a metrics driven society. And I think that is part of why I was so attracted to living in Europe, is because it seems a little bit less here, especially in like Spain. But yeah, this because it's never going to be enough, right? It's going to be this constant reaching for something that just only gets further and further away, or incrementally, you're almost always reaching it, but you just never quite get there. And that takes a toll on you, on how you view the world, but also how you view yourself. And then that gets the critic going again. Yeah, so I think there's a real art form to taking things as they come, and to not being obsessed with outcomes. I think that's another thing that these young people, especially these days, are obsessed with, whether it's like work or, your fitness or your beauty, or, I'm going to get this. I don't know about in Poland or right now, but you said you lived in the UK as well. So like, especially in the UK and the United States in recent years, like beauty modifications, like lip injections and, facelifts and yeah, and it's like, it's so funny because it's like skin is elastic, and like as soon as you stretch it out, it's going to change again.
Yes.
It's like there's no, and I know that's not necessarily the point for a lot of people, that they're going to look exactly perfect someday. But I just think it's like we want to believe. I mean, this conversation can go in so many directions. But I think we want to believe that we'll never die. I think like there's this fear of death, and there's this fear of losing. I think loss and becoming irrelevant. That goes hand in hand with like a more like, so because there is like the other side of the coin of being focused on yourself and spending time with yourself is like self-obsession, becoming like so obsessed that you have to be the best. And yeah, I think that we could become so focused on your own individual identity that the rest of the world ceases to exist, right? And vanity metrics are the only thing keeping you going, right? Rather than friendships and travel or whatever makes you happy. Yeah. So you think the surgery is making you happy, but in reality, it's pushing you even further towards an unattainable, or away from an unattainable goal.
You're trying to measure your worth through what other people's going to tell about you, because this authenticity and this deep self-acceptance means that you are okay the way you are. And of course, there are situations which needs to be taken in consideration that require modifications. That's 100% sure. But what we are referring to is the lip injections, or sometimes a little fine tuning, which is not really necessary, but just makes people believe that after a particular procedure, they're going to get closer to this unobtainable perfection, which is imposed by Instagram posts which were modified by Photoshop, and
Right.
just not real. It's just not real.
Right. And it goes back and forth. I mean, if you look at the history of fashion, it's like skinny, curvy, skinny, like every 15 years, it goes back and forth, and it's totally made up. It's totally like, invented by, somebody who's capitalist goals, who wants to make money, wants to sell things. And it just pushes you further away from yourself. And keeps the critic going, right? Because the critic is then coming from the person trying to sell you things, or the company trying to sell you things, and then it gives your inner critic more energy as well to keep going.
The very last question.
Yes.
If you were to give your younger self an advice, what would it be?
That's good. That's a great question. I feel like I've said that to all your questions. They've all been fabulous, but I feel like I have this conversation, me and my friends, we talk about this kind of stuff pretty frequently, and we chatted about it a couple weeks ago, and I said, this is the thing that comes to mind. I'm sure I would say a bunch of stuff, but like I've always been a very adaptable person. I can adapt to like any situation, you know, I can make friends kind of anywhere, and I've always really I've been proud of that fact about myself, and I've really, in my early 20s, I really dove into it of like I can survive anywhere, you know, like you know, $10 in my bank account and like a place to sleep and I'll be fine, you know. And I think that looking back, I wish I had been a bit wiser about what I'm adapting to. So if a situation, you know, just because I can adapt to something does not mean that that I should. So that would probably be my number one. And this, like I said earlier, this was at a time where I was surrounded by people constantly. I was having so much fun traveling, but I didn't have that space in my life to go inward and to reflect on how I was feeling. And so yeah, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the spirituality of being able to have time for yourself and a space for yourself, and get back in touch with how you're really feeling, and yeah, what your life is like. So yeah, don't adapt to the wrong thing, I guess.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And I love it. And I love it.
And what about you? I don't know if you have something that you would say to your younger self. I'm so curious. I feel like I've talked this whole time, but
what I would say to my younger self, that trust the process, and you're already enough.
Very important. Very important.
You're already enough. You're perfect the way you are, and everything's gonna unfold the way it's supposed to unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like young women especially don't hear that enough. You know, I mean, young men too, actually. I'll make it just a general statement. But yeah, I think now more than ever, it's hard to be a young person and feel good in yourself. So very, very good piece of advice. It's important, even if it's hard to hear for them and hard for them to internalize. It's important to say. Yeah.
It was lovely. Thank you so much, Rachel, for
yes.
It was so much fun. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you.
And thank you so much. It's been like, this is the most interesting conversation I've had in the last week. So thanks so much for sharing and creating the space to talk about this kind of stuff.